if you have not seen headlines related to it, last week, I think it was about 4 or 5 days ago, there was a huge kerfuffle out there because people's private, and I use air quotes loosely with this, private conversations with ChatGPT had been indexed and were now showing up in public search results. And of course, I actually saw it because people in my social circles were like, hey, there's this great opportunity for you to learn more about how people are interacting with ChatGPT and see what they're talking about and see what questions they're asking. And I immediately looked at it and went, I don't think this is intentional. But I knew people were going to freak out. And so sure enough, then there was this whole bunch of noise all over that. And the way it was represented, so I want to set the record straight of what happened here in case you've heard this and you're freaking out. It was represented that ChatGPT is making everybody's conversations public and they're being indexed by Google. Okay, that's how a lot of the headlines were being framed, which naturally had people freaking out. And there's screenshots of like people's conversations and search results and all this other stuff. So of course, everybody's panicking. And rightfully so. If that actually was what's happening, I would agree that would be a huge vulnerability in the system that would need to be closed very quickly, which, heads up, it was closed. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the screenshots everywhere, you can see all this stuff. You can imagine people suddenly went, oh my goodness, every conversation I've ever had with ChatGPT is now public knowledge. So there's a mad scramble as people are running all over, all sorts of stuff. Let me explain what really was going on first so that you don't misunderstand, because it was not actually OpenAI openly sharing everybody's private conversations. Okay. That actually never was the case. So don't get in your head that OpenAI was, taking your private conversations and making them publicly accessible. And there was this huge vulnerability in there. You had the option with conversations to share them. It was a relatively recent feature that OpenAI had added so that you could collaborate on a conversation with somebody else. You could invite them into the conversation. They could participate in it. It was for collaboration purposes. And within that, you had the option to make it publicly indexable. Now, I understand people going, why on earth would you ever want one of your conversations publicly indexable? Personally, the number of use cases I can think of where that would actually be valuable is so narrow that I'm like, you were just asking for trouble with this. Okay. Can I think of some use cases? Yes. Can I see something where you would be fine? You'd maybe want a group of people to be able to, collaborate, and maybe whatever you came up with, you wanted to share with the world or something like that. I mean, I suppose I'm sure this is one of those, and I've been in rooms with developers before where it's like, hey, shouldn't we do this? Because somebody might want it. And again, if you're not thinking through the long-term implications and taking into account most people's technical acumen, it sounds good on paper. But in reality, I really struggle to find some real practical use cases for it. But nonetheless, you could share a conversation. There was a little tick box that said, make it publicly indexable. And as you can imagine, there are lots of people who are moving fast, not paying attention. If I remember correctly, it's already been sealed, so I can't go back and look at it. But if I remember correctly, it was not checked by default. So you actually had to physically check it. Okay. But again, many people they're in a hurry. They don't understand the implications of what they're doing. They're just moving quick. And so lots of people just shared and checked the box. And so their stuff was out there, and Google is really good at finding things, and it found it and, put it all over search results. So that's what happened. Okay. OpenAI was not taking everybody's information and against their will sharing it publicly. That was never the case. That's not what they were doing. So if that's what you heard, that is not accurate information. I want to set the record straight on that. And it was truly, I think, many people just moving fast, not understanding the implications of what they're doing and checking a box when they shared things. All right. So that's what really happened. Now, because of the backlash, they've just straight up rolled it back, and they're working with Google to get everything taken down and all this other stuff. So, if you were thinking, oh, I really use that feature, well, it's gone now, which, if you have a good use case for it, I'd love to hear it. I truly had to sit and think about it and go, when would this be wise? And it really was a stretch. But if you've got one, hey, I'm open to hearing it. But it's closed now, so you can't do it even if you wanted to. So there you go. We closed the gap. All right. But I do think it illustrates a lesson that everyone should be aware of, which is I am going to continue to repeat and encourage people, do not share things with any AI app or any app, anything that you wouldn't potentially want showing up somewhere. Okay. Now, my real recommendation is don't do things you wouldn't want people finding out about. That's just a best practice to have, is just don't do stuff. But that's not me saying privacy and discernment and security are silly. Just live life in such a way and then who cares? I don't like that attitude. So don't interpret my view on this as everybody should just not care. I absolutely am someone who is a big advocate for privacy and discernment. However, as a best practice, do not share things with AI. And this is a perfect example. All it takes is you moving too quick, not paying attention, and before you know it, something, ends up somewhere in someone's hands that you didn't want to, and information about you is shared. Now, last week, I shared about the rising legal risk of people's conversations being subpoenaed. Now, that's a different one because that's not an option you can turn on and off. If it gets subpoenaed, you're just cooked. This one was, but it's another reason to say, hey, be really careful what you're doing. Slow down. If you don't understand something, if you see something that says make indexable and you're like, I'm not really sure what that is, stop, look it up, check, do a little research into what might this do before you do it. I get we're moving fast, but this is another one of the reasons why moving fast is not always a good thing. And right now there's so much pressure to move so quickly that it's causing major problems. So be wise with how you're using it. Slow down and look into some of this stuff. And then even just to slow down, when you hear things like this, take a breath. Okay. The amount of misinformation about this huge security flaw in OpenAI, while I think the feature was dumb and reckless, OpenAI did not deserve the heat they got for it. They really didn't. It was a functionality. It was a feature that was available. People foolishly, and again, we don't want to take responsibility when we mess up. We want to blame the tool, which I'll talk about next. This was user error. This was user error. That's really what this was. Risky feature, yes, but ultimately it was user error. And so if you're seeing some of this stuff, or if you hear somebody say, do you know that whatever you put in ChatGPT will show up on Google? Please correct somebody. Say, you know what, I heard that too, but I actually learned later, and well, you want to mention this or however else you found out, and just say, actually, that's not the case. What actually happened was there was a feature, people weren't paying attention and they accidentally shared information. So best practice, don't share things with AI you wouldn't want potentially being there, and slow down and actually pay attention to what you're checking before you just move on with your day. But that one kind of blew up. Clarity came. They closed the gap. Now it's not even an option. So even if you were thinking to yourself, boy, I really would like to use that, or some of the companies that were really excited about it were excited about the fact that they could now go harvest people's data and see how they use AI, which, go figure that's what some organizations would be really excited about. But needless to say, it's in the past, but I don't think this will be the last time we hear about something like this happening. So be conscious, be aware of what you're doing out there.